Hi Linda, I'm so happy to have the opportunity to speak with you today. How are you feeling today?
Oh, very inspired and energized. A
Mm-hmm.
little bit physically tired,
Mm-hmm.
but the nourishment of my soul and spirit and being
Mm-hmm.
in France
Mm-hmm.
with you
Mm-hmm.
and Ava and
Mm-hmm.
all of our Quest instructors
Mm-hmm.
here and all the other instructors who are doing different kinds of equine facilitated learning and therapy. We just had a conference where we brought a lot of people together from across France and beyond.
Yeah.
And people were really good about sharing ideas and engaging in a kind of mutual respect and inspiration rather than competition. And I always
Mm-hmm.
find that really inspiring.
Mm-hmm. 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 You are doing this work since 20 years, and in the beginning, you were really questioned and attacked and all of this. What has changed in those 20 years?
When I first released The Tao of Equus in 2001, there weren't a whole lot of books out there that were talking about how horses and other animals, what they have to teach us.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they work on our, not just our physical nature or our mental nature, but our emotional and spiritual nature. At that time, there were still a lot of people who didn't believe that horses had any intelligence or emotions. And
Mm-hmm.
since then, scientists have shown that animals do, in fact, have emotion and that they have very specialized and refined forms of intelligence. And so when I was talking in the beginning about how horses were affecting me and what they were teaching me and how I was able to become a better human being as a result of incorporating their wisdom into my life, a lot of people would say, oh, you're anthropomorphizing, anthropomorphizing.
Mm-hmm.
And I even had some lectures at universities and presentations where certain people would walk out when I would say these things.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have so many books by so many respected scientists that do in fact talk about animal intelligence and emotions.
I've come to know you as a real visionary. You just have a visionary mind. You're curious. You do research. What inspires you today?
I think that one of the things that inspires me is that we're beginning to do scientific studies on the horse-human bond, the power of the horse-human bond. And a lot of these studies are actually showing things and giving some reasonable scientific explanations for aspects of horse behavior and the way they affect humans that many years ago we would have seen as mystical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I know that I quoted your book
Mm-hmm.
when I was writing The Power of the Herd, where you talk about how horses help to make the invisible visible, invisible forces that are shaping our lives. And I also talk about how a lot of insights that are seen as mystical or spiritual are actually simply nonverbal or unphotographable. And so what we're seeing now is that, yes, there are still some things we'll never be able to explain about how horses move us deeply and how they transform us. But there are also certain aspects of the invisible now that are being made visible, not only through the anecdotes that we're telling, but through actual videos that capture really quite amazing interactions and some scientific studies that are suggesting the reasons why this is even possible.
And what makes you personally happy in your work? What gives you joy? Very privately, just what is your joy?
My joy, my biggest moments of joy a lot of times are after a really deep, soulful workshop where people have shown up and they're willing to be vulnerable and they're willing to step into the unknown. And they're also willing to do that in such a way that they're not taking out their fear on others. That we hold hands and we go into the unknown together. And I'm seeing people being able to do that more and more and more. And at the end of those kinds of workshops, the day after such a workshop is always a day where I let all the horses free on the property and I spend time with them on their terms, hanging out with them, and enjoying the beauty of the desert, and enjoying the fact that I have this amazing life where I have animal companions who are actually colleagues in taking us on fantastic journeys of expanding consciousness.
And that also is the source of your vision, isn't it? That you can experience this, that you can invite people to have these experiences, that you can see the change in the people, and that you can imagine that this change for the whole world would change the whole way we interact as humans, even on a political level.
Absolutely. We're seeing a lot of backlash right now in the political world, so that the expanding rights of women and people of different sexual orientations in the last 20 or 30 years has felt threatening to people who were embracing a very conventional view of life and society and what humanity is. And so now we're seeing a real fight against that. But it's really not about threatening anybody's lives. It's about expanding into a place where everybody can be welcomed and everybody can learn the tools that they need to truly fulfill their potential in life. Whether you're a man or a woman of any particular race or sexual persuasion. And so I'm just hoping that some of these tools that we're giving people, and you do this too, you go around the world and you do equine facilitated work and work with nature as well. And I just have learned some tools that humanity desperately needs to get to the next level. So it's exciting to be able to say not just what things should look like or how we should be embracing our potential, but we have actual tools and skills now that we teach that offer people ways of interacting with each other and processing information and becoming more empowered without engaging in power over.
Yeah. Yesterday we talked about something really interesting, something you wrote in a book that was published in 2013. And you wrote there that the predatory power is increasing and that it seems that it's going to get stronger and stronger because the conditions in society support it. And it is now 5 years later, 2018, you can observe that this is happening. And it is really scary. You said you find it really scary, that you intuitively felt that and that now you see it happening. And can you say a little bit about it? Why is it? What was your intuition, and why is this happening? Why does the dominant predatory power get such a platform?
Well, in 2013, I was looking at the history of power across multiple cultures and throughout time, and looking at patterns of how people use power. And I noticed that because our culture has become, our culture has for many hundreds of years been based on conquest. And so when a culture is based on conquest, conquering others, enslaving others, using others for personal gain, that's a highly predatory mentality. And it's not the function of predators in nature, which is to keep life in balance with available resources. Human beings are acting like dogs who have rabies, who are running amok and just biting everything in sight, to a point where we're actually heading toward a kind of collective suicidal behavior. And one of the things that I observed is that in our culture, even the press itself is intensely predatory. So that the function of the press should really to be more like a sentinel to observe group dynamics in relation to threats and opportunities in the environment and ways that different cultures interact, and to be able to report clearly and honestly what is happening, so that then people have the available information to decide what they'd like to do about it. But instead, what we see now is a trend where the press is constantly, and is rewarded through the ability to sell really juicy stories, to kind of slink around the edges of society and do what predators do, which is to seek out others' vulnerabilities and use them against them. The predators prey on the most vulnerable herd members. And so predatory behavior in human culture is not necessarily involving crimes like murder. It is simply the interest in not reporting honestly or not seeing that human beings have strengths and challenges that they need to work on and reporting that honestly, but to look for the chink in the armor, to look for the weakness and to really amplify that and go for the throat on that. And when that happens, you know, whether the people are, you know, movie stars in entertainment or musicians or political figures or simply, you know, social activists, when that's the case, what you get are a bunch of really compassionate people who really sincerely care about others. It's very hard for those people to step into the public. So what you get is that our culture selects for bullies and sociopaths. And these people tend to step into power and gain power because they have the constitution and the orientation and even the enjoyment of a good fight. And so one of the things I wrote about in 2013 is that it takes an unusually courageous, altruistic motive for an intensely compassionate person to step into this fray. And so we're actually seeing that now, where around the world, a lot of really aggressive, confrontational people are stepping into politics and, you know, being able to, you know, savagely and aggressively counteract these attacks they receive on a daily basis, you know. But the more sensitive people are saying, I don't know, I'm done with this, I'm stepping away, I can't handle this. So we're not doing ourselves a favor when we as a culture are selecting for the most aggressive members to be our leaders.
We talked about the feeling of vulnerability that has no place in this dominant kind of behavior, and that a real key is to learn to handle vulnerability, like to allow vulnerability and to not to just go and stay present in vulnerability, what we can learn with horses, to go, that this is a important task to learn this.
Yes, and we're defining vulnerability as what arises when you find that, you know, all your old coping strategies and all your best tools aren't working in a situation. So anytime you're stepping out of your comfort zone, you're going to feel vulnerability. And also, yeah, we all have challenges and skill deficiencies. And so when we encounter those, we're going to feel vulnerable. But the idea is that we're going to see these challenges and skill deficiencies, and rather than become aggressive in response to them and try to hide that vulnerability, we're going to say, oh, this means that I need to get some new information here, or some new tools, or I need some additional support and training. And in a predatory culture, you have to hide vulnerability. The tendency of predators is to hide vulnerability at all costs, because they know that other predators are going to seek their vulnerabilities and come in for the kill. And so what you find is in highly predatory settings, the tendency is for people to become very aggressive when they feel vulnerable, and to attack when internally it feels like a defensive move. And so, yes, highly predatory and highly dominant people will become aggressive when they feel vulnerable. Whereas they don't understand quite yet that to feel vulnerable but be able to be present and hold your ground is actually more powerful than becoming reactive in the face of it. You know? And so one of the things that you and I both agree upon, and one of the things that we do in our work, is to help people increase their tolerance for feeling vulnerable without panicking, so that you can feel vulnerability, you can make a mistake, you can recognize publicly that you lack a skill set, and you can say, all right, you know, thank you for letting me know. I'm going to get some support now. I'm going to bring in some additional experts, and we're going to find out what's going on, instead of attacking back and acting like you know everything that's going on.
And I
That's
think
actually a sign of weakness.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's what happened at the salondubienetreaveclecheval at the fair, because there was different people of the field of coaching with horses. They were competitors, but there was an atmosphere of being allowed to be vulnerable, to being yourself, to being authentic. You didn't have to walk around with big armor and show how strong and intelligent and good and successful you are. And that makes a whole different atmosphere of trust, where everybody feels welcome and everybody feels good. And this is the kind of community or society that is a vision where we can grow into. And I think that's what we both enjoyed here in
Yes.
France and this teams and community.
Absolutely, and it's what it really shows me is that all of the people who are doing horse-facilitated learning and therapy, no matter what their orientation is, or their perspective is, or their emphasis is, or their style of working is that they themselves have over the years been influenced by the horses. And so horses are non-predatory power animals. And
Yeah,
whether
yeah.
whether these different facilitators are conscious of that or not, what I'm seeing is a shift in the field away from competition and posturing and trying to drag others down to promote yourself, but instead truly taking on the wisdom of the horse at an intimate level
Yeah.
and shifting the field as a whole
Yeah.
to represent that wisdom.
And that is a wonderful vision we both share.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you very much, Linda.
Thank you, Rika. It's been a pleasure. That was great.
Yeah.
We did it.